Hello and welcome to the RamsTalkPodcast preview show. This week we're talking all things O's as we go to Leyton Orient this weekend. A tie that we've not really come accustomed to. It's quite new to us, travelling down to London. And to talk it all through with me, I thought what better way to then get a fan who's there every single week, home and away. I've got Liam O'Brien with me, who's going to talk me all things Leyton Orient and get me up to date with an opposition that I'm not really best known with. How are you, pal?
Not too bad. Cheers, Callum. Yeah, doing well. Licking the wounds from the FA Cup game against Chesterfield, and yeah.
Go from there. Well, I said when you look at you mentioned there, we talked about it previously just before we went live. I mean, FA Cups are always those kind of odd fixtures where, especially when you come up against a lower league opposition and you kind of look and go, do we want to progress and go on a cup run and then possibly have a big team in the latter stages, or do we just want to get out of it and focus on the league? I mean, a result 1-0 defeats to Chesterfield. I mean, is that real cause for concern? I mean, obviously, you were there in attendance. What do you think of the performance, and how do you go from there going forward?
Well, the whole match day was a bit of a weird one. We started off, there was a big snowstorm, so we sort of all got on the train up not knowing if the game was going ahead. And then the third round draw was on before kickoff. So before we were even at the ground, we knew that our fate lies Watford away, which was, I wouldn't call it celebrations, but it was a fairly good tie. Always possibility that one could be put on TV. So always the murmurs. But I mean, before the season started, our board were very vocal about the fact that they want survival and they want a bit of a cup run, and the fact that we started the season in 3 cups and we're out of all of them by first weekend of December is worrying. But the most worrying thing was, as you said, I was in attendance, and for the whole 90 minutes there was a serious lack of effort, and that's not something that I've become used to with Leyton Orient in the last 6 or 7 years. Even when close to administration, the one thing we always had was we had players given 110% every week. And for the first time yesterday, because you can lose games, you can be outplayed. This is a new division. We're playing teams like yourselves, Portsmouth, Charlton. If you get outplayed in a game and you lose the game, you can walk away saying they were the better team. But I would go as far and say pretty much every single player on the pitch didn't give as much as they could have. And that's a real shame as a supporter who is willing to travel hundreds of miles every week to see players that obviously we know that they care, but if they're not showing it on the pitch, then what good is it?
Yeah, I mean, as I say, when you go as fans, you kind of go that the minimum thing you need is effort, isn't it, from your team? Especially when you say you're going away to games, and especially braving the elements as they were at the weekend, you kind of go, well, the minimum you can give us is 100% effort. If we get beaten on the day by a better team, is what it is. But I mean, was that really, when you look at losing to a lower league opposition, you kind of look at it and go, yeah, you put things in perspective and you go, could just be a bad day at the office. But as you say, with that lack of effort, is that a cause of concern? Maybe that it's not the management, so that he's quite lost the dressing room. We haven't gone quite that far, but it is something that it might just click a red flag into your head and go, well, this isn't something we've seen before.
Well, listen, Chesterfield, we'd already seen them in the first round. They beat Pompey in front of thousands of people live on TV. They're a mile clear at the top of the National League. They're not your standard non-league team. There's a lot more embarrassing teams we could have lost to in that draw, but it was the manner of the defeat which was agonising. And I think it's not, when it comes to a performance like that, you can't blame a single player or a single member of staff or the owner or director of football, whatever. It's a collective responsibility, which I think has started trickling on over the last few weeks. We're winless in 8 or 9 now. After what I would call a good start to the season. I think we were 3 points off playoffs at the end of October, which is, I certainly did not expect to be that high in the table at any point during the season. I think where we are now is a bit more realistic to where we should be, but the manner of the way which the performances have been getting worse and worse. Crowds have been becoming restless. Players and staff less willing to interact with the fans at the end of games. It's a bit of a collective nightmare at the moment, which hopefully we can get out of sooner rather than later. But it's just been trickling on and getting slowly worse and worse as the weeks have come on lately.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's something that you're not quite sure of. You're in that patch of form at the moment that has brought you probably back down to where you think you should be, maybe going into the season. But I mean, the start you had, the season you had last season coming up. I mean, Richie Wellins is kind of a staple mate with you guys, and he's much loved. I mean, do you see the last few weeks and the last few games just slightly tarnishing that a little bit, or is it just really it's just one of them? You're going to hit a bad patch of form, and you got to stick behind him and the lads, and you just got to go from there.
The last person at the club which I'd speak down, no matter what the season ends, would be Richie Wellins, because of when he took over as manager, we were third from bottom in League Two. And in 18 months, he won us that league. And it was only really with 4 or 5 signings, half of which were loan signings, and the other half realistically were panic buys because of injuries we had last season. This summer, obviously, he had to make a lot more changes because we went up and we lost undeniably our 2 best players, Paul Smith and Lawrence Vigouroux, to teams higher up in the divisions, which that's not something you can control. But luckily, we managed to keep everybody else that was out of contract or that had interest from other clubs. But when you have to rehash a squad like that and bring in players that you assume are going to be able to make the jump up a division, and they haven't quite made that jump, at least not yet anyway. We've got quite a few young players, quite a few loanees, and you don't expect them to get right every single week. But it starts to become a problem when they're getting it wrong every week, and it's the same players doing it pretty much every week. And, any player can look at our squad. If you watch even the games we're not playing well in, you can single out the players that have class. You can single out the players that are on loan from higher end teams in the Championship or in the Premier League. And you can single out the players who maybe weren't necessarily the manager's first choice signing, or maybe in the squad due to injuries, because we do have a few injuries, especially at the top end of the pitch. It's a bit of an issue when you've got as many issues as we had up front in a single space of time, but when players get brought in squad on the bench, you expect them to be fire and fit with effort. And as I keep going back to my previous point, pretty much all of our strikers sort of played against Chesterfield, and none of them showed effort. So,
yeah, and when you're looking at, you didn't really put out a weakened team. I mean, you 1-1 draw against Wigan at home. I mean, I'm looking at the lineup, recognise a few players from the title-winning season. You've got Mizuni there in the middle. You've got Archibald. There's some couple of decent players who really were on song last year and took you to that title-winning season. I mean, just talk me through a couple of the players that have played this year who've maybe just been a bit back and forth. Talk me through a couple of players that you might see as a Derby to be a threat.
Well, I think one player that will stand out, and I don't think you'll find any Orient supporter that will disagree with me, is Ilgis Albazuni. I mean, he is class above not just our squad, but he's class above the midfield, every midfield that we've played. And we've played Portsmouth and lost. We've played Stevenage and lost both those games quite badly. And even in those games, he stood out. Maybe not necessarily in his best patch of form at the moment, which I'm not complaining about, because the African Cup of Nations is coming up soon, and there's sort of murmurs that he might get called up for that. Obviously, from a selfish point of view, I hope he doesn't, because that'll be 2 or 3 weeks in the busy winter period that we'll miss by far and away our best player on the ball and off the ball, because he's simply just everywhere. Another player, we've got Brandon Cooper on loan from Swansea, who was brought in, again, probably wasn't the manager's first choice, was a deadline day loan, and I mean, he's just hit the ground running, and he's been a stalwart at the back in a fairly leaky defence. You know, we conceded 4 to Portsmouth, 3 to Stevenage. You know, there's been many games where we've conceded fairly poor goals from set pieces, but even in a leaky defence, he has stood out, and I'd say aerially dominant is a key word, because he's always up there in both boxes from set pieces, and anything he can get his head on, is cleared perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at players like Mazzuni, I mean, he was linked with teams like ourselves. I mean, when you look at the managed to keep him going from the title-winning season, you kind of go, well, you've not done too bad to make him stick around. He must like the place, and he must like the fans, and he must like the way Wellin plays him in the way he is, because he is, for me, quite one of the standout players within the league. I mean, when you look at the way you play, I mean, I'm looking at it. Is it 3-4-3? Wellens likes to play at the moment. I don't know if that's one of the apps that I've managed to find. I mean, what is the style of play that Wellens maybe adopted this season, maybe compared to last season? Is he kind of carried that on, or is he kind of just slightly changed his tune, being in a league above?
Well, he tried his best to keep the exact same formation, exact same style of play. We played a 4-2-3-1 last year. But a lot of that was down to Archibald and Smith on the wings last season. We didn't have a starting out-and-out number 9. We had Charlie Coleman, Leyton QPR, we had Aaron Drinan, and sort of had the two of them alternating as a striker, with either Ross Tiriu or George Moncur and 10 behind them. This season, as I said, few injuries up front, losing Paul Smith. And then early on in the season, we had some bad defeats, just conceded quite a few goals, and then we shortly switched to 5 at the back, and it worked for a period of time, because we had Theo Archibald on one wing back and Jordan Graham on the other wing back, who sadly had some cruciate ligament damage at Burton away and is out for the rest of the season. So that sort of disheartened the hopes of the 5 at the back. So since then, he's probably been alternating between the two formations that I've said, and 3-4-3 probably is the most accurate, because we haven't really been going with a number 10. Even though if you watch the games, it looks like we have got a 10, but they've sort of been pushing up towards the higher end of the pitch, because we don't have every striker we seem to have, we don't really have a poacher. We've got Joe Pigott, who's a target man who makes runs off the ball, likes to be on the ball. We've got Ross Tiriu, who plays up front, but also plays in 10, plays out wide. We've got Aaron Drinan. Again, you can lump the ball to him, he'll hold it up. But Ross Tiriu, he has got 7 goals this season. He's a good finisher.
Yeah.
But we've also got Shaq Ford on loan from Watford, who's come up with a couple of important goals this season. But we don't have that number 9 that always pops up with the goals that you need. And I think when you're in a team whose main goal is to survive, it's something that we've all been desperately crying out for. And to be fair, we cried out for last season as well. Luckily, just the pure attacking talent we had with Smith and Archibald sort of provided us the goal that we needed. We won the league. Paul Smith was our top goal scorer, and I think he had 11 league goals. Ross Tiriu's already on 7, but there's still a massive gap in quality up front.
Yeah, I mean, you've touched on him there. I was going to bring it up. I mean, you lost a couple of players last year, going into this season, that were quite pivotal. I mean, through our mutual friend Amanor, and I know the chance that you guys brought up throughout the time. I mean, him going to Queen's Park Rangers. I mean, your goalkeeper, Vigoro, was always a big one. The way you played out from the back, now Bryn in goal. Is players, when you come up from League Two title winning season, that were fundamental, that means then that they do get looked at from teams above, they move on. That holding on to those players can be really, really hard. And obviously that can be detrimental to you guys who are trying to then just survive this season.
Yeah, I mean, the Vigoro was the big one. We wanted Smith to stay, but as soon as we heard QPR were interested in him, it was a no-brainer, because he didn't want to leave QPR in the first place. But yeah. Vigoro, it was all sort of hush-hush. He was linked with Charlton. He was linked with a couple of championship sides, ended up going to Burnley. And I mean, Lawrence Vigoro, complete and utter gentleman, and 100% the best goalkeeper I've ever seen at Leyton Orient since I started going. was the best goalkeeper in the league last season and probably the season before that. Player of the Year 3 years in a row. I mean, his accolades in 3.5 years at Orient was just spectacular. Every full season he played, he got Player of the Year. You have to be special to do that. And we were lucky in 2021 that even signed an extension then. Managed to hang on to him. And if we're being realistic, he is the reason we got promoted last season. I'm not saying it was a one-man team, but some of the saves he made, got the Golden Glove, the amount of just crucial moments defensively that just pop into mind whenever I think of last season. He was just so important, and losing him was the first sign of how good we were last season and how different the squad will be, because as you mentioned, we've got Bryn on loan from Middlesbrough. And, fans, as soon as he signed, wanted to compare him to Vigouroux. And it's not fair on Vigouroux or Bryn, because no matter who we got in, unless we somehow got Jordan Pickford or Nick Pope in, they were never going to be at the level that Vigouroux was at. So immediately criticism got on his back. And, a lot of people within the Orient community know me for getting on Bryn's back quite a lot. But even I can sit here and say it's not fair on the chap to be compared to somebody who won us promotion when Bryn was in the same league last season and was mid-table with Swindon.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to touch on in just a moment about how close the club is and the fan base and the team, and just something that I found quite amusing with yourself and your cover photo on Twitter, which I will bring up in a bit. But when you look at Derby trying to pose a threat, I mean, we're coming to an unknown entity that we haven't played. I don't think in a very long while, if ever. I don't know when the last meeting was between our two clubs. I'll have to go back in the history books. But
that would be a first or second division tie in the 70s or something, if there is one. But I know we have played. We have definitely played before, because the only team in the Football League we had never played before coming into the season was Burton.
Right.
That's the only thing. We had never ever played Burton before, but that means we've definitely played you before. Don't know when. Could be before World War II, but
yeah, we'll go pre-war dates. But I mean, if Derby fans coming this weekend, making the travel, are going to get behind something and see something that we might be able to pose a threat, what would that be? I mean, what have teams managed to pick with the O's this season that Derby might be able to get on the back of?
The problem is it's not a might, it's a will, and it's set pieces. And I'm not trying to disrespect anyone at the club here, but we have been absolutely abysmal at defending set pieces this season. I guess at least a third, if not half, of the goals we've conceded have come from corners or set pieces, or even headers cleared to the edge of the box from corners. I mean, it's just aerially, spatially, there's so much space for opposition strikers and centre halves. Even when we play with 5 at the back and we have a big lad up front, and you'd think we'd have the numbers to be able to clear set pieces, but just so many goals that and I think we have only scored one. We scored a late equaliser against Bristol Rovers from set piece, and that was an own goal. So it wasn't even down to much of our doing. But I mean, we have been, and it's weird because last season we were quite good from set pieces. We've got centre half who unfortunately is injured at the moment, Omar Beckles. He always used to dominate in both boxes, and he used to get a few goals from it as well. And this season, just the amount of times balls come into the box and I've sort of clinched myself and I've gone, that's going in. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But it's just the fear of every time an opposition gets set piece, you'd rather just give them the goal, because it's just you can see exactly what's going to happen, because it happens week in, week out. And let's be fair here. Derby don't have to, the way Orient have been playing, Derby don't have to be at their best. If you can get the set pieces, if you can get your wingers in behind and get yourself a couple of corners, get yourself a free kick, you will score one of them, because that's the way our season has been going at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to get on the back of that, but at the moment we can't score from set pieces for toffee, so I think we're all good.
We're in for a 0-0 then.
Yeah, we're in for a 0-0 away trip, which I don't think anyone who travelling down will much enjoy, but especially in this weather. But I mean, I did bring up slightly, and I will just touch on it. You don't see many fan bases go into pre-season tours and having photos with the team. I mean, that is absolutely brilliant with how a club and a fan base should connect. I mean, just touch on me for that. I mean, the way a club and a fan base should connect is that the fans and the manager and the team feel as one, and that's when something you feel you can get behind. I mean, how did that come about? I think most clubs should be really looking to adopt this and really, really getting that culture between the fan base and the team going much more. I think Derby's one of them, and a lot more clubs and within the league will probably agree. But I mean, just touch on how that came about and how the fan base and the team are at the moment, and with you guys.
Well, I mean, it all started in 2018 when the club was taken over by manager Travis and Kent Teague, and one of the immediate things they did was the previous owner before them had destroyed the confidence between the club and the fan base. And since then, there's been a pre-season tour every year, either in the Algarve in Portugal or in Marbella in Spain. That picture that you're referring to was this year in Spain, and it's just the sort of thing where me and my mates just go, we want to go on holiday, we'll go to Spain, and just happens that Orient are there. And that night, they do a thing called Meet the Players Night, and it was in a golf club. It was a bar. If anyone has been to Spain, you know how cheap the drinks are, and it's just all evening through to nearly midnight. We were still there, just chatting away. Coaching staff having a beer with us. Players obviously sticking to the Fanta Lemons for the time being because they had a game the next morning against Charlton. But yeah, and then free entry to the friendly the next morning. Players get a bit of training in a new environment, and then there wasn't a single player there that night that we were there that didn't want to speak to people. Even the young lads that were the same age as me, they were still up for having a chat about how the season was last season, about this season, even just the sort of thing of how nice the weather is, just small talk as if you're chatting to your mates. And for the time being, you forget that these are the people you spend hundreds of pounds on every couple of weeks. And it's nice, it's refreshing, and I'd like to think that the club does have a really good fan base, and a really good connection with the fan base. It does implode every now and again. It's sort of imploding at the moment. Obviously, we're on a bad streak, but that'll be mended because there will always be a few fans that will moan a bit more than usual, and there'll always be a few fans that are a bit overly optimistic, shall we say. And I think it's nice to have a fan base with both sides and have a medium, and then you go on a good win streak and everyone's up here. You go on a lose streak, everyone's down here. Happens in every fan base, but players at Orient anyway that I've known aren't going to shy away from it, win, lose or draw.
Brilliant. And I mean, I think a lot of clubs should take that mantra. I mean, it was just something that really popped up to me that I haven't seen before. And I think a lot of clubs and fan bases should look to that as something to adopt. Going into this weekend, if you were going to put a score on it, we'll finish on a score prediction. What are you going for, pal? And if you are going to have a goal scorer this weekend, who you pipping?
I'd go for. I'm going to be optimistic here, and it's going to say a lot. This is optimistic because if you guys are at your best, it could be a cricket score. But the way I'll go optimistic. I'll say 2-0 Derby, and that's optimistic.
Right, that is a first. I mean, I guess saying a Derby win. I don't know if that's going to jinx me now and if I go for a draw. I'll go 1-0. I'll go smash and grab. We'll go for a set piece goal, and let's say that I don't know. James Collins scores it. I don't know. Right. Thank you very much, Liam, for coming on and giving up your time. I'm sure I'll hear about your antics this weekend. Have a great game and have a safe travels going. And as I say, we'll hopefully come around with a win for Derby. But if not, we'll see if any of our predictions are minutely close, pal.
Cheers. Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.